Okay, well, welcome everyone. Can you hear me okay? Am I on the speaker? Wonderful to see everyone. My name is Craig Johnson. I'm professor of political science here at the University of Guelph. And we're here today to discuss an issue that I think has become unavoidable in the daily press, on social media, and certainly in academia, and from what I'm told at an amazing migrant summit today. Looking at the nature and scale and implications of precarious migrant labor and its relationship to Canadian and global agriculture. It's also a very special event for us here at Guelph, and I think for many of you and family and friends listening online, to pay tribute to our dear friend, Kerry, who passed away almost 7 years ago to the day. I think it was the 28th of January. So welcome to everyone. I'll introduce the panelists in a few minutes. Given our shared interests in borders, migration, citizenship, and rights, I think it's fitting that we start by recognizing that we live and work on the ancestral lands of the Arawandran people and the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We recognize the significance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant and offer our respect to Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Métis neighbors as we strive to strengthen our relationships. I'll start first by just offering a personal memory of Kerry. I think, like many of you, I was touched by her friendship and her scholarship and her work over the years. I think I first met her in 2002 when I first came to the university. She was a seasoned veteran there, I think, of about 2 years by the time I got here. And immediately I was blown away by both her positive and outgoing personality, her commitment to social justice, and just the sheer joy of being around her when we shared offices on the 6th floor. I remember one time she came back from doing field research in southwestern Ontario with the largest cucumber I think I've ever seen in my life. And she gave it to me as a gift, and I was very grateful. But it really sort of opened my eyes to the precarious nature of migrant labor in this part of Ontario, and also what it would mean to be a scholar with a strong commitment to social justice and the well-being of people around the world. And I think it's credit to her that we have so many people here today sharing in this discussion. Joining me on the panel are Dr. Evelyn Encalada Grez, who is Assistant Professor of Labor Studies, Sociology, and Anthropology at Simon Fraser University. Dr. Sally Humphries, Professor Emerita of Sociology and Development Studies here at the University of Guelph. Dr. Warren Dodd, an IDS alumni, and also Assistant Professor in the School of Public Health Sciences at the University of Waterloo. And Gabriel Allahdua, Migrant Labor Advocate and Visiting Fellow in the Grounded Theory Lab here at the University of Guelph. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. I'm going to take a back seat, and open the panel up. First of all, I've asked the panelists, or we've decided that we would first start off by reflecting on Kerry's legacy in both your personal lives and in your professional lives. And then we'll move on to more focused discussion after that. I'll add that I'm happy to moderate questions from the floor, and we'll also be monitoring the online chat. And if people want to ask questions online, they can do so as well. So Evelyn, we'll start with you.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I wish Lila Downs was here to open up with music, like the music that Kerry liked to listen to, like the lullabies that she would sing to Sophia when she was a baby that she would tell me about. So, but I did bring streamers from Mexico, because it reflects the beauty of her soul, and what she loved so much, the world that she loved so much, Latin America, Mexico. And my presentation is personal and political, academic, but mostly activism. it's intended to reflect Kerry, who did all of this work, Sin Fronteras, where she tried to also hold multiple worlds within her praxis, being a rigorous academic, an excellent, exceptional sociologist, while also being an activist and working with activist communities. So I didn't know where to start. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to start with the last time I saw her to tell you a little bit of a story. But mind you, I just came back, well, Gabriel and I just came back from the Migrant Summit, the whole morning. And so I know for sure my brain is fried. So give me a moment. I came from BC, so it took me a while to get here. Okay, I wanted to start at the end. The end being the last time that I saw her. This picture is hiding so many things. It was right after Kerry took the stand as an expert witness for the Prestige case. That was a brutal case where the employer was sexually harassing the female workforce. And at the end, after several years, 2 women stood firm and took on the employer, and Kerry was so instrumental to mobilizing her research in the space of the law through the Human Rights Tribunal. And I remember just being in that room, it was so disgusting to see that one employer had about 4 lawyers. And on our side, the worker side, we had 2 lawyers. And it was awful to see the ways that the lawyers from the employer side obviously were trying to break down Kerry and the migrant women that were adamant to have their case and voices heard. And so we were at the edge of everything ourselves and seeing the force and the violence of the law. Kerry, you know, she held herself with so much grace. She had flown from the UK to be a part of this case to testify in person, because that was when we didn't know we could do things over Zoom. And it was also, there was a heat wave happening where it felt like we could almost, well, I know I almost fainted because of it. That's how bad it was. And so that's my last memory of my professora. She was one of my mentors that was basically teaching me how to be a sociologist. And she was supposed to be with me towards the very end of my PhD and be a part of my community. But then she wasn't part of my community. Instead, she became a part of my life and imprinted so much within me, as I know she imprinted so much within many of you in this room. The last message that I received from Spencer, that none of us received, was that Kerry was basically waiting to die. And of course that night I didn't want to sleep, because I knew when I woke up, most likely Kerry was not going to be around. So the night I just thought, you know, what's the point of this academic work that we do? Like, what are we doing? What is Kerry leaving behind? Aside from her beautiful children that are her legacy. And we started doing this online search about Kerry's work, and I saw Kerry everywhere, including on the Human Rights Tribunal Ontario website, where there was like some, I couldn't find it, but I did see it that night. And then I just started to see the importance of what powerful academics such as Kerry for all of us. And so this case, in the end, it was a case that was won, and it set up precedents. It was a precedent-setting case that all workers in Ontario actually benefit from, irrespective of their status. And Kerry, she was instrumental. All of her work was instrumental. Oh, and I also want to say hello to the Preibisch family from Chilliwack. And so I started to see that Kerry lived out what she made every single breath count. And one of the last messages that she sent herself before becoming severely ill, to the point where she couldn't email anybody anymore. She was concerned with sponsoring a refugee family from Syria at the time. So even at the very last part of her life, she was always concerned with human rights, asylum seekers, and she lived every single moment expressing all of her passion for social justice. And I also wanted to mention that Kerry was as well an expert witness for the Ned Pert case. And again, she got to those spaces because of all of her work. And so that's where we see that academic work is so important, because then that academic work becomes evidence. That academic work then has all of this weight in these spaces of power. And then it was so amazing. One of the best amazing projects that I have ever worked on in my life until this point has been one that Belinda Leach led, Women Making Change, and with other academics here at Guelph. And wow, I really miss the website. I wish the website was still up, because there was so much content there. And Kerry was the researcher for the migrant aspect of the project. And wow, through that project, I learned so much about how to really make research accountable to the people that you say that you're aligning yourself with, that you say that you're in support of. And so with Kerry, we co-organized these workshops with the migrant women. And there's Janet McLaughlin, she was there too, of course. Dr. Janet McLaughlin, and we had a workshop where we wanted to present our findings to the migrant women to make sure that we got all of their testimonies and their experiences correct, that we weren't misconstruing their stories or their words or any way. So Kerry was dedicated to this type of research before it became more of a thing. And then also one of my most beautiful memories of Kerry was, here I am, sometimes I get like, I don't know, complain about being tired and I need more energy. And wow, so Dr. Adiburu with Kerry, both of their energies amazing. So Kerry was pregnant with Ben and this is both of them arriving from Mexico City on a bus. Was so happy to be finally arriving to this migrant town that Janet and I also spent a little time together at. And Kerry didn't let anything stop her. And Kerry, of course, would always say, well, just because I'm pregnant doesn't mean that I can't do all of these things. She just was always wanting to be out no matter what. Like, that's what made her so happy, being out and about, doing ethnographic work, being in community. And of course, a large part of our community work was eating on our farms with migrant workers. So that's the way that also a lot of the migrant women show and transmit their love. And of course, we got the same thing in Mexico in the community. So there is Kerry enjoying some homemade food in Mexico. When we were also very happy to be there together. And there's Kerry again, in the home of another migrant worker. So she didn't let anything stop her, including when she did have Benjamin. Of course, she brought him as well to all of these sites. So she was definitely an academic woman, and that was her Twitter handle. She was a true feminist, thoroughly by espousing, by living all of her ideals, by making research a family affair many times. Sometimes, yeah, we would have to coordinate with Spencer and who would have the kids, and we would all go out into the countryside. So that was amazing to see how she made all of these roles within her life function. Even though the spaces of academia are still very course-centered, right, and anti-parenthood, but she always found a way to make it work despite of the obstacles and in spite of the obstacles. And of course, Kerry, she She supported many organizations, including our collective Justice for Migrant Workers. So here is Kerry joining us in one of our actions, Harvesting Freedom in Toronto. And these are the compañeras, the comrades are from Justicia BC, but have now gone off to do other organizing in other parts. Well, Adriana in other parts of the world, in Mexico now. And Kerry was also recognized by UFCW when they used to run the Cesar Chavez Award for all of her amazing contributions to the migrant justice movement. So obviously she just not only worked with Justicia, but also worked with other groups. So she was making sure, trying her best to make her research count in different spaces. And for those of us who are fighting against these structural inequalities in different ways. And then this picture, not a very complimentary picture of me, but Kerry looked really nice, but it's part of the story. So here we are, we find ourselves, and by the way, I've lost track of years because everything's like before the pandemic or after the pandemic, before Kerry or after Kerry. So I don't know what year that is, but here we are in Vancouver. We're giving a presentation showing El Contrato in this very humble Chilean co-op in Vancouver. Yeah, you were there, right? Oh my goodness, wow. And so, yeah, so it's like a little community event. Wow, no empanadas though that day. And little did we know, after our presentation, this woman who says she's a senator was there in the audience. And then she invited us to Ottawa to give a presentation at Parliament Hill to all of these parliamentarians. So you never know, do those community events. Do all of the events, because you never know who's there. And if we're not gonna speak, who's gonna speak, take up space, right? And so there's Kerry in the cafeteria of Parliament Hill with the senator. And then a lot of the parliamentarians actually were busy. And there's Jenna as well. We were having dinner and debriefing afterwards. But one of the MPs that was there was this man named Justin Trudeau. That later on, so, sometimes when my students, the really innocent ones say, oh, but the government should know. I'm like, oh, they know. Well, first they created the system. And I could say, I told Justin Trudeau about all of these issues. And then we also had to debrief among ourselves, because at the end, guess what Justin Trudeau said after he heard Kerry and myself? He said, wow, I can't believe this happens in Canada. And I'm like, I can't believe he said that anyway. But so these are the experiences that we had with Kerry. And then Kerry was, during the last part of her life, she continued to, of course, be driven by ethnographic field research. And she insisted, no matter what her health condition was like at that time, everything was up in the air, but not looking good. She wanted to go to Guatemala and do her work. And wow. So I reached out to this particular family, the Citan family, and they still have a space reserved for Kerry at her table, basically. Like, she is still a part of their lives. And when she passed, they wanted to speak to Spencer, but I'm like, how are you going to speak? Because the language, but they were just so shocked, and they didn't know how to reach out to Kerry's family here. But Kerry has left like so many imprints in people's lives this way. And Kerry did such amazing work in this particular community in the highlands of Guatemala. And actually one of her last articles was about her field work that she did there with other US American colleagues. And Kerry she had this way, well, she learned Spanish many times. I realized that Kerry speaks better Spanish than I do with many things. So I just found that to be so admirable, of how she immersed herself in Mexico. And of course, she lived in Mexico for a few years, did her graduate research there, PhD research. And she had a way with connecting with people that was uniquely hers. And sometimes when we would be out in the field, we would sometimes compare notes. What do the migrant workers tell you versus what they tell me? And I remember once, one migrant worker was, of course, denouncing Canada. And then the migrant worker said, oh, but sorry, because I know you're Canadian. But then Kerry, obviously right away, she said, no, you can tell me anything you want. And so Kerry just made everybody feel comfortable around her. And I learned from her too, how to maintain contact with people, no matter where you are in the world, because she then jetted off to the UK and had an amazing transnational life, right? Because as she had promised Spencer, yes, they will go to the UK. So even though Kerry spent some time in the UK, one semester or in a year or so, she still had all of these connections, and that you don't see all the time with all of the academics, because of all of the pressures of academia and time, the restrictions on time. And of course, part of the field work again is food. How can you get away from food? And of course, Kerry was way far away from the cornflakes there in the corner. And the family that I reached out to recently, actually, the main contact from the family was a former migrant worker, and this is his father. And actually, this migrant worker, Sasna, and we met them, remember, on the street in Leamington. And so all of those contacts become like everybody's contacts, and then one contact leads to a whole family, a whole community. And so that's how we work together and support each other in our work as organizers and academics. And Kerry became a large part of their lives, and she received a lot of support from the family. And the last time I was there with the family in Guatemala, the father here, he led prayer for Kerry because we knew that Kerry was on her last days. And I was rereading a letter that I wrote to Kerry before she passed. And there I explained how when Senor Citan was actually praying for Kerry, I felt some type of energy around me. I don't know what it was, like a force of grace. And so we were all like holding space for her. Everybody was praying for her. And then the migrant worker that no longer comes here to Canada, the one that took us to this community, he told me that they had to contend with and deal with the fact that when they last saw Kerry, that they had to give her one last hug. And I'm like, oh, I can't imagine what that last hug actually was. And then I wanted to start ending. This is the last time that I was at the University of Guelph. Kerry invited me with Minsuk, and there's Minsuk as well, like being a mom, not letting, these walls between, that impose us being just one thing. Of course, we're more than just one thing. And she brought her new daughter to give a presentation on migrant dreams. And I don't know how long that was, but that was the last time I was here at Guelph. And here I am at the university again, where Kerry did so much. She ran the Farm Worker Awareness Week here at the university. She came up with all of these amazing assignments for her students, so that way her students could fuel all of that anger and shock of, oh, I didn't know that this happened in Canada, into their work. And so who knows where those students are and, what they're doing in life, because they are part of that seed, that keeps on growing throughout Canada, the seed, that wakes people up and wakes people up from the myths that really cloud Canadians or people here in Canada with actually seeing injustices. So I'm sure many of them are doing wonderful things. So for me, Kerry's legacy, what did she teach me? She taught me that rigorous scholarship does have its place. And those of us who are not on the mainstream, a lot of our research has to be even more rigorous, because we know that it's going to ruffle feathers. And we need to do research that we check and double check. And I don't think any of us now moving forward, if we're going to continue to write about migrant farm workers, that we can't do that without still citing her work that laid the foundation for where the sociology and the work contemporary foreign worker programs actually is. Like, she built that basis for us. And then she also embodied what mobilizing research beyond academia actually is and should be. And then the importance of community relationships and sustaining these relationships beyond obviously one grant, beyond one season. Kerry had these relationships, some of which she formed, for instance, when she was doing her PhD research in rural Mexico. That's where she started meeting migrants or families that had migrants, not just to the United States, but then also migrants to Canada. So since then, for so many years, she not only built, but maintained these connections. And that is very difficult many times. And then, of course, Kerry not only had these relationships within migrant communities, but also with community organizations, like I was saying before, and unions. And she was an amazing pedagogue that believed and embodied transformative education. So she used the classroom as a subversive, transgressive space to build power, or to show students that they do indeed have power to affect change. Because sometimes when we are teaching oppressions, it could paralyze some students. So Kerry made sure that she also gave students tools to use and feel and transmute their anger into doing something, and doing something that was really tangible. And oh, there's David Griffith. Hello, David. Okay, and then also the love for Latin America. And that's also what her fuel was, to do all of this work that she did. And she also showed that it is possible to dream of having a transnational life, that you can exist, of course, in more than just one place. She made that all work. And while she was traveling, she was still connected to wherever else she was, to all of her steps. And I think about all the people that some of us don't know from the UK, whose lives she touched, and who are also missing her in that side of the world. But I know Kerry's impact was beyond just borders. That's why I wanted to reinforce this Sin Fronteras part. And lastly, it's hard in these academic spaces to get lost in your mind, but I just want to take a moment to see what I have left out in my ramblings before I get to this link. In my letter to Kerry, I mentioned this civil rights leader who said that he knew that he could probably be killed when the US troop forces or state forces were coming against him. Congressman Lewis. It was an actual interview on Democracy Now! That really moved me. And he said that he was just taken by the force of history, the force of change that he couldn't stop, that was embodying him and protecting him and propelling him. And then I told Kerry, envelop yourself in that grace, in that spirit. And if she left us really early, I know that until the very end, she had that flame within her, and it never disappeared. It continues, and it continues within many of you, within many of us. And with Kerry, it made me think about the times that we do get to be here. How are we going to apply our fuel, our energy? What are we going to dedicate ourselves to? And I see that with people like Kerry, when they pass, of course, they don't really die. They remain in so many ways. And so I see that it is very difficult to hold academia and activism. Kerry did it. And once you do all of this work, and it is really difficult for us, especially for us who are racialized and we don't, you know, we're bodies that have placed many times. People don't even think we're professors. But with Kerry's example, I realized, you know what? It's all worth it, because what we do is beyond us, and we leave all of this behind for future generations. And so Kerry left us so much, and I'm glad that we're able to commemorate her and celebrate her. And I want us to leave with her joy and passion for everything that she did, including the passion she had. I remember before she passed, she really wanted to make cookies with her son, Christmas cookies with her son and with her daughter. So she pushed herself to be there for them during Christmas. So she had all of this strength and force. And I wonder too, I'm almost done, sorry, during the times that we saw migrant workers die in the farms, or during the times when we heard of migrant workers that we've known for many years, like Luis, right? Erika, who's done amazing work with Erika Miranda, Luis, the Sunflower Man. There's so many people that didn't make it. And I always wonder, what would Kerry be doing, you know, during the time of the pandemic, where we saw that some lives were completely disposable. We've always known this, but now, wow, it's just like right there in our face that some people are just allowed to let die. The state lets certain people die. What would Kerry be doing? I know for sure Kerry would be continuing on to lobby, to do her work. And speaking of her work, I am very lucky to have a really amazing research assistant who helped me compile a listing of Kerry's work that you can find through this tiny URL. I try to make it as easy as possible, but it outlines 15 pages of Kerry's work. You'll see many of your names there too, because of course, a lot of us collaborated with her. So that's something that I wanted to give to all of you who are here. And it's a gift that Kerry left us and future generations and migrant workers and their families. So for those of you who are academics and activists, don't lose hope. I think Kerry's life is a beacon of hope that we can hang on to when it's 3 a.m. and we can't sleep because some things do or not do. I think all of our work is really worth it. So I think Kerry taught us that we have to keep on going. Gracias.
Thank you. Gracias, Evelyn. Your comments have evoked so many memories that I have over the years of Kerry, and I love the way you put it, that she ruffled feathers. She was such an amazing ally in her research, obviously, but also as a colleague and a friend here at the university. I remember many good fights being fought that wouldn't have happened were it not for Kerry. And thank you again for those comments. Before we move on, I just want to double check with the people online if we've lost them. Okay, but they're still with us. Excellent. Okay, thanks, Daphne. Okay, next I'll invite my other former current colleague, Sally Humphries, to say a few words.
Well, after Evelyn's talk, it's a hard act to follow, I have to say. My comments will be much shorter. So, you know, I remember very clearly when Kerry arrived at Guelph in 2001, and, you know, the dynamism that she had, right, was evident right from the get-go. And she was going to go places, there was just no doubt about it. And straight away, she and I became really close friends. Despite the difference in our age, we were just really, really close to each other. And we socialized outside the university, and in the department, we ruffled feathers together, and we nearly always fought for the same causes. That's within the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. And I said goodbye to Kerry the very night she died. Spencer told me, invited me to the hospital, and a couple of hours from now, 7 years to this day, it's extraordinary that this has happened on this event around this day, the way it's occurred. So what Kerry and I initially bonded over was, am I speaking too loud? I don't think I, okay. I've got a very loud voice. What Kerry and I initially bonded over was community engaged scholarship, our absolute commitment, our compromiso with our research partners and the communities that they represent. And I should add that we also bonded over our passion for Mexico. And Evelyn's already talked about this extensively. Both of us have done our doctorates in Mexico, focusing on small farmers. And we both collected quantities of artisanía during our research, which we filled our Guelph houses with. And we had this dream that we would go on a shopping spree together to Mexico to buy armfuls more of artisanía. Sadly, we never did. I have to say, I'm wearing gifts from Kerry today. She said the colors look like Mexico, even though they weren't from, she didn't buy it in Mexico. What I should say, though, before I start my talk is that Kerry, unlike Evan, I didn't work in the exactly the same area as Kerry. We were both development scholars with an interest in farmers, but we focused on them in different contexts. So I can't provide the same kind of discussion that Evelyn has just provided to us. So Kerry, obviously, her focus is on Canadian farms, and my focus shifted to small farmers in Honduras. So my focus is more at the other end of the migration chain. How can we improve food security so that migration isn't such a pressing factor? So unlike everybody else on this panel, I'm not an expert in migration. And what I'm going to talk a bit about today is engaged scholarship, which clearly Evelyn has mentioned. So when Kerry started back in 2001, there was much less clarity about what engaged scholarship was. And there was even less when I started in the mid-90s. But we were both fortunate that we were in a department, Sociology and Anthropology, where a colleague who had started in the 1970s worked in the area of engaged scholarship, even though there was no such name as such at that time. The person in question was Nora Sabotarev. She was a researcher and engaged scholar right up until the year she died in 2007. She was a pioneer, not only because there were far fewer women social scientists at the time relative to males scientists, but she focused on women, particularly in Latin America, and she supported them through research and development in numerous ways, working with CEDA and other funding agencies. Because engaged scholarship was unrecognized in the academy at that time, our department created a special category for Nora's work under the title of professional practice. Recognizing that much of what Nora's work encompassed didn't come under the label of research alone. Happily, when I joined the department, I was partially put into this category too, allowing me to pursue a much broader development focus than is normally permitted at universities. More recently, the category was collapsed by the department into what is now called engaged scholarship. Whether the two categories are comparable is not for discussion today, but I think it's an interesting discussion. So what is an issue here is a lot of what goes into engaged scholarship is not necessarily recognized in the number of publications that a scholar has produced. And again, we see that very clearly in through Evelyn's discussion. The kind of engagement that Kerry's work encompassed, as well as my own, means being an ally of those with whom we work. Kerry was a very strong ally, as we know, of migrant workers and the organizations that represented them. And I won't go into Evelyn's already discussed how she provided expert witness, how she went to Ottawa and met with senators and members of the House of Commons on discussing the shortcomings of the seasonal agricultural workers program. And in Guelph, I remember an incident where she was advocating for a group of women who were on a private contract from Mexico. I think they were contracted to a worm producer in Guelph. And Kerry was outraged at the treatment they were getting, and she immediately leapt into action and to see how she could find a just solution for them. And I'm sure there are dozens and dozens, as Evelyn has referred to, of instances of such engagement on behalf of migrant laborers. And what stands out for me is how she was always ready to use her knowledge gained through her research to try to influence policy and challenge the law in support of the rights of migrants. She was tireless. And clearly this work went beyond what is typically expected of an academic, but it was advocacy that was grounded in the excellence of her research. And she was a highly effective ally and advocate because her research was so strong. This is worth stressing because one of the dangers of being an ally is that you can be dismissed easily because of the perception of bias in research. To be an effective ally, I would argue, requires the individual to be a very, very strong researcher, and Kerry was. So as you've heard from Evelyn, Kerry published in a wide array of journals, and I just looked at a few: Rural Sociology, International Migration Review, Journal of Ethnic and Migration Studies, American Anthropologist. These are top journals. Such a publication record requires very solid research. It also speaks to her capacity for interdisciplinarity, her strong social science focus rather than a strict disciplinary one. She could publish equally in one of the top sociology journals, such as Rural Sociology, as in one of the top anthropology journals, American Anthropology, Anthropologist, sorry. Her meticulous data collection analysis, which grounded her theoretical frameworks, came from her detailed attention to the stories told to her and to her research assistants during interviews with migrant workers across Canada. She was an effective ally of migrant workers because of the strength of her publications and the data that underpinned them. Kerry's work mainly employed qualitative data, the stories of migrant laborers, which she collected in a variety of locations, obviously in farms across Ontario and other provinces. But I remember stories she told me about visiting bars and dances and obviously in home communities. Kerry was out there collecting data. And she analyzed this data using rigorous methodological tools to ensure accuracy. Her approach was mainly inductive. She used the data and analysis to inform her theoretical frameworks that were grounded in the lives of migrant workers and in the political economy, larger political economy. Her meticulous presentation of her data and strong writing skills helped to mitigate the perception of bias in her work as an ally. So I'm just going to deviate briefly to some of my own work, but I'll be brief on it because this is about Kerry. The perception of bias is something that I, along with my research partners in Honduras, have had to confront in research in the area of project evaluation. The gold standard for project evaluation is the use of randomized controlled trials, which seek to use the scientific method in social science evaluation to avoid perceptions of bias. Effectively, it means comparing those affected by a specific project or program against those without it. Whenever we seek to publish our evaluations, and we always publish as a team, we are invariably asked why we didn't use randomized controlled trials. It's quite easy to counter the suggestion that we should have taken this route, since a project such as ours, which involves training farmers to be researchers, is one where individual communities or individuals choose to opt in, and they're distinct from individuals or communities who choose not to opt in. In other words, there is a distinction between these groups, and they're not necessarily comparable, and hence randomized controlled trials are not a useful instrument for determining impact. But in view of this, very strong research methods are essential to establishing the legitimacy of the study and to guard against accusations of bias. Without these, we would not have succeeded in publishing in the top journals. The point that I'm making here is that if you're an ally, it behooves you to have very strong research methods, or your findings will not be taken seriously. Even armed with carefully applied methodologies and strong research, community-engaged researchers are still liable to be criticized. Certainly, Kerry faced pushback from Canadian farmers who employ migrant laborers. And while some of the poor working conditions that migrant farm workers face are due to individual farmers, Kerry's analysis of the broader political economy within which Canadian farmers are forced to compete recognize the structural factors that contribute to the working conditions of migrant laborers here in Canada. She offered a wide lens on problems facing migrant workers and Canadian farmers. So even though she had many critics among the farmer population, her arguments in favor of improved migrant workers' rights were not aimed at individual farmers, but rather at a systemic level. In Honduras, it's also been necessary to keep systemic factors rather than individual opposition in mind. The pushback to farmer participatory research, and especially to participatory plant breeding, has come from plant breeders and government scientists who resisted the idea that small farmers have an important role to play in improving seeds and research more generally for food security. The dominant model in Central America in the early 90s, when I started as a researcher there, was that the plant breeder alone should be the one who determined the best seed varieties for national release. This led to a long-term standoff between the research organization in Honduras that I helped to set up and the head bean breeder for Central America and the Caribbean. It took more than 20 years for this to change. It was only when empirical evidence could no longer be ignored that change occurred. So take heart, those who have been working for a long time in the field of trying to change legislation around migrant laborers here. In Honduras specifically, we found that bean varieties, which involved the selection of small farmers, had much higher adoption rates than the varieties that were developed solely by the breeder on the research station. The breeder, who is a very well-known figure in the region, is now a standard bearer for the engagement of small farmers in research, a change that has brought a new approach to improving food security in the region. But he needed the empirical evidence before he was willing to chart this new course. In other words, he needed very strong research. And in the interim, a period of about 20 years, I faced many awkward occasions when we were seated side by side, much as we are today on a panel, without speaking a word to each other, both of us convinced that our approach was correct. The discomfort of confronting sometimes very angry opposition means that engaged scholarship of this nature is not for the faint of heart. Kerry was never faint of heart. She was always ready to stand up for the migrant workers whose human rights, she argued, were not being adequately recognized by the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program. Finally, I have to add in here that Kerry's position on workers' rights was an integral part of her cultural DNA. Her family, particularly her parents, Gerhard and Wynne, who I know are listening, are stalwart NDPers. She was raised in a household where it was understood that workers' rights are sacrosanct and should be defended and protected from both capitalist and statist infringement. But as mentioned, Kerry was clear about the bigger picture that imposed hardship on Canadian farmers to the requirement that they compete in a continental market that was dominated by US producers with access to cheaper labor and easy access to a much larger market than is available to farmers north of the border, was very much part of Kerry's analysis. It was the system that shortchanged Canadian farmers more generally and migrant workers particularly. This breadth of perspective, her research excellence, her tireless devotion and passion for research allowed her to be enormously an enormously effective ally, an advocate for the agricultural workers, whom she strived to support in every possible way. Her compromiso, her commitment to them, was absolute. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Wonderful words. Next, I'd like to invite Warren Dodd, and it's a particular pleasure. Warren is both a former student and now a good friend and colleague, and it's wonderful to have you here.
Awesome, thank you. And yeah, just to begin, it is a real privilege to be here. I'm grateful to be speaking with everyone and sharing some reflections on Kerry's work, and particularly Kerry's role as an educator. I was a student of hers. I was an undergraduate student in a class that was focused on migration, and I was one of those students whose jaw dropped multiple times when she shared about the plight of migrant farm workers in Canada. And it was that that class, in combination with other experiences I had during my undergraduate, that really motivated me and made me want to look more at this issue of migration within a global context. I also had the opportunity during my PhD studies, which were here at the University of Guelph, to work as a research assistant with Kerry. And we worked on a small contract that was funded by the Solidarity Center and USAID to examine migrant work and look at the ways in which global governance, immigration policy, and broader ideas around development and rights intersected to shape migrant experiences and precarity, particularly when accounting for the shift towards increasing demand for temporary migrant workers around the world. And this was, for me, an incredibly challenging project to work on. Kerry pushed me in ways that I didn't know were possible. She refined my writing skills and really, made a real impact, not only on my understanding of the theoretical underpinnings of work around migration in the context of global governance, but then also just pushed me to be a better researcher, reader, to look at things very critically. And I'm just very grateful for that opportunity to have worked with her in that close capacity for about 2 years. And my PhD work, it was in epidemiology and international development studies. And I know people hear a lot more about epidemiologists these days. A lot of the work isn't theoretically grounded. We don't engage necessarily with some of these ideas around rights and political economy. And so what I was really grateful for through this opportunity was to bring that lens to then some of my more quantitative work going forward. I then took these ideas and this theoretical foundation and applied it to some of my PhD work, which was looking at the health of internal labor migrants in India. I was working on a border region between Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. And we were looking at or trying to understand the role that migration played in rural livelihoods. And it was through this work that I saw parallels between some of the things I had heard from Kerry talking about in terms of the issues that were facing migrant workers in Canada, and the negotiations, trade-offs, tensions that migrant workers and their families faced in order to make a living and support their families in a real way. I also had the opportunity then to take some of these ideas to work in Honduras, and I've had the opportunity to work with the Foundation for Participatory Research with Honduran Farmers, which is the organization that Sally was speaking of, and speak with migrant workers or speak with families who had migrant members either in Spain or in the United States, and just understand the role that migration was playing in people's lives, how it shaped their understanding of how families who were not migrating understood migration, the role that remittances were playing in people's lives, and just in some ways how people were feeling forced to migrate as a result of an increasing challenging conditions in Honduras, both political instability, gang violence that was increasingly moving into rural areas. Since some of that work, we've continued to work on this issue of migration and introduced a new idea around this concept of immobility. And what this helps us think about is people's conscious decisions not to migrate, and understanding the role that agency and rights play in shaping and in informing conscious decisions not to migrate. When in areas where there is high out migration, there are people who are making a choice to live in rural areas, and there's a real role for community development organizations in supporting families and individuals who are choosing to not to migrate, and even creating this as an option for people in the first place. I now also have the opportunity through some students I'm working with to work in the highlands of Guatemala, which I know is an area that Kerry did a lot of work. And in this work, we're thinking about the ways in which migration, and particularly remittances, are supporting climate change adaptation and supporting local food transformation and agroecology and food sovereignty movements within the highlands of Guatemala. And it's interesting because I think sometimes we think of food sovereignty movements and agroecology movements as these self-contained movements that are happening. But I think what some of this work is showing is that remittances and these transnational networks are very much informing climate change adaptation and food sovereignty and agroecology that's happening within rural areas of Guatemala as well. So I'm really thrilled to be a part of this work and kind of continuing to engage with some of these ideas that I worked on with Kerry a number of years ago. So I think the main thing I wanted to share and the message that I wanted to get across was I have the opportunity now to be involved in teaching and mentorship. And right now I'm working with, I think I'm teaching about 400 undergrads across a couple of classes. So it's overwhelming sometimes, and sometimes it's not the most, I don't know, it's fine. But I think just in preparing for this, I think I just was thinking through the role that Kerry played in my trajectory, and you don't really know what the way in which you're crafting the classes, the messages that you're sharing, the impact that might have on students in the classroom. And so that's, I guess, a message for myself and others here who have the opportunity to work with both undergraduate and graduate students, that it's a real gift and privilege, and there's an opportunity to shape different people's trajectories. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Warren. Now, last and certainly not least, Gabriel, and as you're starting to talk, I'm going to stop the share of the PowerPoint because I think there's some difficulty seeing the video from the people online. But you go ahead, and I'll just monkey around with the.
But I need your attention, Mr. Moderator. PhD, PhD, PhD. Can I put PhD on my name tag? Absolutely. For so many reasons, whenever I'm on all those PhD speakers, I would try to come up with an acronym. PhD. And when I think of Kerry's work, the best I can think of right now is people have dreams. Her work makes sure that the people at the bottom, the people who ensure food security, the people who work hard to put food on our tables, they too have dreams. Mr. Moderator, I want to tell you that I was forced to come to Canada, and the last speaker, he spoke he made mention of migration several times. I want you to know that had I come to Canada by choice, I'll be a tourist, I'll be a visitor. There's so many situations, so many factors come into play that force us to leave our home country. I was forced to come to Canada because of a hurricane. I was self-employed doing 5 different things, and just one hurricane literally pulled off the carpet. And doing those 5 different things, I felt my life I was so confident that my income was diversified. I felt so confident that even though one is affected, that I could still live a decent life, but one hurricane. But Mr. Moderator, who are the countries creating global warming and climate change? Mr. Moderator, who are the countries paying the price? The global south are the force to become migrants. And there's so many reasons, and I'm pretty sure my colleague here can give you a lot of reasons. But let me get into it. I want to tell you, in my home country, no news is good news. The loudest voice, I was forced to come to Canada, but one of the loudest voices in my head was your silence, Mr. Moderator. You never told me about the difficult conditions that migrant workers face. The loudest voice, that thing that really helped me to decide to come to Canada as a migrant worker was your silence. And no news is good news. I want to tell you that when I arrived in Canada, I realized that English is not the most common language in Canada. Neither is French, neither is Spanish. The loudest and most common language I discovered in Canada is the voice of the marginalized. I want to tell you what nobody wanted to touch, nobody wanted to talk about, nobody wanted to take it on. That's what Kerry took. That's what she did. She took it on. I want to tell you, Kerry did not just take on these things, ruffle up feathers. She did that way in Guelph. The status quo that we see in our society, it's right here being maintained by Guelph. Ministry of Agriculture, OFA, you name all the players, they're right here in Guelph. How can you describe somebody who can take on a giant? How can you describe somebody who takes on a giant right there in their hometown? Unlike my other colleagues, I don't think I ever met her. I think I got the opportunity to attend her funeral, but it never worked out because I'm not too sure whether it's because of snow or whatnot, and I was new to Toronto. I didn't know my way around. So I didn't really see her. However, I am so proud to tell you, I'm so bold to speak up because I know that the foundation that I'm standing on is a foundation that somebody who knows that the people at the bottom, the people who has food security, Canada's food security in their hands, we're standing on that person who's laid that solid foundation. And we heard from the previous speakers how her work was tireless in laying that foundation. I want to tell you, let's talk a little about the status quo. A couple of things. This university, they honored Mr. Ken Ford. And if we know about Mr. Ken Ford and the organization that he represents, they do everything to maintain the status quo. And what is the status quo? I want to draw 3 instruments to your attention, Mr. Moderator. Are you ready for them? Instrument number 1, and that is enshrined in Canadian law. According to Canadian law, a migrant worker is denied the right to vote. The same politicians who create those unjust policies, PPP. My poverty in Canada is because of the unjust policies of politicians. We cannot vote, deny the right to vote. And that's enshrined in Canadian law. Enshrined in Canadian law, who is a migrant worker? Another name for migrant worker is cannot. We cannot vote. We cannot participate in family life. We cannot. Who is a migrant worker? Somebody who cannot. I want to tell you instrument number 2, the 3 pillars, and we heard a couple of times about the seasonal agricultural workers program. The 3 pillars of that program, pillar number 1, we are here to do jobs Canadians do not want to do. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Moderator, during the pandemic with employment so high, I thought Canadians would go pandemic, high unemployment, food security is important. I thought Canadians would go to the farm. They didn't. Even during crisis, Canadians do not want to do it. It's simply because, why? The conditions are not right. They're not just. Pillar number 1, we are here to do jobs Canadians do not want to do. Mr. Moderator, do you know that there are no more migrant workers in Canada? During the pandemic, we got a promotion. We are no more migrant workers. We are now called essential workers. That's a very deceptive promotion. Nice words, again, the politicians, nice words, but where's the action to back it up? So we're here to do jobs Canadians don't want to do, number one. Number two, we do not have status. And what is status in Canada? In Canada, if you do not have status, you're denied basic human rights, denied basic labor standards. In Canada, if you have status, you have rights. We are here to do jobs Canadians do not want to do. We do not have status. And number three, we are tied to our employer. Tied to our employer. Let me go over that. I am tied to my employer to do jobs Canadians do not want to do, and at the same time being denied basic human rights, basic labor standards. Is that an accident? Is that an accident? Or is that by design? I would like you to answer me, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Moderator. But before you answer me, I want to draw to your attention the third pillar, the third instrument, and I call it buy local. Every time we buy local, and I love local fruits, I love local vegetables, I think of freshness, I think of good health, I think of supporting the local economy. But let me tell you the story. Every time we buy local, think of the hands that are involved in the production of your local. Number one, Canada is saying to the sending country, send me people of color. Buy local, people of color. Canada is saying, I even rather those people of color, if English is a second language or they cannot navigate the language. People of color, language. Send me also those people who are ignorant about labor issues and human rights issues. The food that you eat, race is involved, language is involved, and ignorance. So isn't that the recipe for exploitation? And these are the very same people that are tied to our employer. And what is Canada saying? Come, send me those people. Come, welcome. In a climate of fear. And I will take 5 hours. I will not tell you all the elements of fear that is built into the program. So Canada is saying, come, we in a climate of fear. And that is forcing us to be submissive and compliant. Where is that happening? In a country we know with a culture of silence. Nobody says nothing. That is why I'm so proud today, because when nobody wanted to talk about it, who took it on? When it was a non-issue, Kerry took it on. And the ground that I'm standing on, it is really solid because Kerry knows that Canada's food security is in the hands of migrant workers. But these people too, food insecure, they do not have, both their living and working conditions are difficult. So that is why I'm really extremely happy to be on this panel. So I have a PhD, people have dreams, and I have dreams because of people like Kerry. Thank you.
Actually, well, thank you so much, Gabriel. We're a bit later, I think, than we'd originally planned, but we started a bit late. I'm happy now to open the conversation up to members of the audience, and I'm also happy to run around with a mic to give you a voice. So please do raise your hands if you want to share an observation or make a comment or ask a question of our panelists. And I know many of you are probably quite tired after a long day at a full day summit.
I have a question. I just thank you. They were very, very moving. And yeah, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing what Kerry meant to you. And as somebody who also benefited from knowing Kerry and the amazing legacy that she left, just thank you for sharing that. I know it was, you all were very close to her. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you too. I should add, I think this is something of a cathartic experience for many of us, that this is certainly the first time I think that I've engaged in a public discussion around Kerry since her funeral, so 7 years ago. And I think COVID affected so many things in our lives, but it particularly affected our ability to connect and reconnect. And I'm really grateful and so happy to see such a strong turnout today. of friends and colleagues and family online. And it's just, I think, were she here, I think she would be so happy and engaged herself to be in this conversation. Can I encourage anyone else to just share a thought or an observation or a question? Belinda Leach, thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Thanks. And I'd like to thank the panelists for reminding me a lot of, my friendship and the allyship that I found in Kerry as a member of the department. But the point that I really want to make is that when I started working with Kerry around migrant worker issues, at that time, it was still based around the bilateral agreements with the countries of the Caribbean and Mexico. And she pointed to how that was expanding beyond those agreements. And she anticipated what we have actually seen happen, which is this influx of temporary migrant workers being brought into the country under labor market opinions that say there's a need, but to work in all kinds of industries well beyond agriculture. And while I think the specifics of the agricultural system is really critical to how workers are recruited to work in that industry, I think that there is still lots of work to be done as activists around migrant workers now working in other industries. We've seen in mining, in fast food. Those are just two that come to my mind really quickly. But Kerry was really prescient in recognizing that this was going to become a major route for capitalism to deal with its problems of labor, especially in a country like this, where, as Gabriel points out, Canadians don't want to do a lot of these jobs. And, we can see exactly why. So yeah, she was really at the forefront of understanding these global shifts and what they meant. And also, Evelyn, your slides reminded me of how beautifully she dressed. So loved seeing what she would wear each day. Thanks.
Actually, Sally and I.
I just want to add, my thanks. Your presentations were all so moving. At one point in each of them, I had a tear, and I think you just evoked her memories so perfectly in different ways, all of you. So thank you. And at the Migrant Forum today that Gabriel so wonderfully inspired in us, one of the questions we were discussing was, how can we bridge activism and academia? And this panel reminded me tonight that Kerry has really given us that framework. We're a bunch of us in the room. How do we do that? How do we do that? Well, Kerry did it. She laid the groundwork for us. So, all we need to do is follow her example. And I think that would be a wonderful way to honor her legacy. And Gabriel, I know that you left today saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I think, again, Kerry would say, do something, put your minds together and be that collective push. And for Kerry, we should. So Gabriel, although you never met her, I do think that you are pushing that momentum forward that she would really want to see. So thank you for that. And let's all keep going with that in her honor.
Thank you, Janet. I think what a wonderful point to end this amazing discussion on. And I just want to thank everyone. Oh, we have one last question from the ever tricky Ian Spears. I'll hand the microphone over to you.
Thank you. I also have learned a lot from the panelists, and this is such a wonderful tribute to Kerry. Just one thing I have to add. So I came a year after Craig Johnson, and Craig Johnson, I've just learned, came a year after Kerry to the University of Guelph. And it's when you're a new scholar, there's lots of things that are intimidating for sure. But Kerry always struck me as someone who seemed to be at least fearless. And this may seem like a small point to make, but obviously her concern for issues of justice and so on infused everything that she did. And that included even with her colleagues. So I just remember being on a panel with her at one point in, I think, the year or two after I was at Guelph, and she was very clear. I'm not sure who she was speaking to, except to say that junior faculty should not be overburdened with work, because they really did have to make sure that they were able to get their own research and attend to their students and so on, and not be burdened with too much, as we call it, service work. And as I never would have had the nerve to be able to say that myself. And I just felt that that seemed to be, it's obviously infused everything that she did in her life, but that was my own small experience with her. Thanks. Sorry, I just had to add.
Thank you for that, Ian. She was a wonderful barometer. Whenever I was in doubt about where I stood, what I thought about development, about human rights, or about my own job, I think she was a great person to just check my moral and ethical compass with. Yes.
I'll be really loud. Wait, I'll be really putting the mic.
Just so the people online can hear you.
All right, I always have to stir the pot, so I'm going to. Gabriel just brought up a really good point about our good friend Ken Forth, who's the chair of the Foreign Agricultural Resource Management Services, the head people who are in charge of the Seasoned Agriculture Worker Program. A few years ago, he received an honorary degree from this university. It might be a good time to have that honorary degree rescinded.
Thank you.
Can I add one more point?
Yes.
I want to say that when I first arrived in Canada in 2012, there was a major accident in Kitchener, Hampstead, and that's where I first came across Justicia, or Justice for Migrant Workers. And right now, we have two founding members of that group. Evelyn, who earlier said she was mentored by Kerry, and also Chris, who is another founding member for Justicia, and Sazna, okay, also worked alongside Kerry. So Kerry influenced those people, founding members of Justice for Migrant Workers. That's the first group, first organization I ever came across in Canada in 2012. When I thought, and that was a non-issue, nobody standing in my corner. When I thought it was my liaison that would be fighting for me, it was these people from 2012. But up to now, they're still here for the long haul. And I'm telling you, the fact that I am a former migrant worker into that group, the future looks bright, good, because so many migrant workers are coming into the fore. So it is all as a result of Kerry's work, essentially. So the future looks good, and her legacy lives on. Thank you.
Okay. Well, in that spirit and in Kerry's memory, I want to thank everyone for being here today. Thank you for those of you who joined us online. Thank you to the panelists for some wonderful, thought-provoking, stimulating, challenging discussion. We will be recording, or we have recorded the event. We'll upload it onto our website once it's been transcribed. We'll also make sure that Kerry's compendium of publications will be made available too. So if you want to access those, we'll make them available. Before you leave, we have some modest refreshments here to enjoy before leaving the room, and just encourage you to congregate, say hello to one another, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.